Getting lean is pretty simple. That doesn't mean it's easy to do, it just means it doesn't require any complex knowledge or techniques. It simply requires consistent repetition of some really straightforward basics. Staying lean long term is not the same as getting lean once. Whilst it's still not exactly rocket science, it is a bit more of an art, and if it's something you aspire to do, then there are some things that you should know and some things that you should do that will make it much easier for you, particularly if you're natural and particularly if you want to be lean at 30 and 40 and 50 years old. This video is those things. Let's do it. Number 1, get shredded, stay lean. You can get shredded, but you can only stay lean. This might sound like splitting hairs, but the difference between lean and shredded is an important one. There are potential negative consequences of having low body fat: decreased energy levels, lower test, low mood, low libido, development of eating disorders. The list goes on, right? The point at which these symptoms start to affect a person is quite individualized, but for most, this stuff isn't happening at 12, 13, 14% body fat. Getting extremely lean, aka shredded, and then maintaining that for a long time is a fairly surefire way of making sure you experience at least some of these symptoms. Even competitive bodybuilders only ever reach their most shredded for a very brief time when they're actually competing, and even then they're usually masking or mitigating a lot of these symptoms with special supplements. So the average Joe who just wants to look decent in a t-shirt on the beach, in the gym, should not be attempting to maintain an unrealistic level of leanness. Now, apart from being really bad from a health perspective, it'd also be quite a miserable existence. Obviously, you're free to be miserable if you want, that's nothing to do with me, but it's not advised. Now, lean is something you can maintain. Low double digits body fat, visible abs, enough muscle definition to look athletic and aesthetic through most rational lenses, all entirely possible without any of the bad stuff. And if you do want to get really shredded, make it brief. Take your profile picture and then just quickly get back to normal. 2, build muscle first. 2 parts to this really. First, it's easier to build muscle and then get and stay lean than it is to do it the other way around. Second, the more muscle you have, the easier it is to stay and appear lean, which are really the same thing if you're doing this to look a certain way, because none of us are actually going and getting our body fats measured in accurate ways, right? So you might aspire to stay lean with any level of muscularity, from swimmer, surfer, Hollister model, right up to a more bodybuilder look and size. But the less muscle you have, the further down this end of the scale you are, the harder it will be to maintain leanness, because you'll require and burn fewer calories at rest. Having more muscle costs a lot in calories, so you'll essentially constantly be using more when you walk up the stairs, when you're sat on the couch, when you're doing or not doing anything. And having a higher calorie requirement, of course, means that you can consume more before you start gaining fat. You can maintain leanness with lower levels of muscularity, but you'd either need to burn more through conscious activity or consume fewer calories. Typically, people who do maintain leanness with less muscle tend to be ones who are very active climbers, cyclists, athletes of some kind. If you're not that, if it's not part of your everyday life, it might be difficult to maintain. 3, master intuitive eating. Whilst I do think that tracking your calories and macros is probably the single most useful thing you can do when trying to lose fat, and I think that everybody should do it at some point just to develop some kind of idea of what's in what you eat, I know that most normal people don't want to track everything they consume forever, right? That'd be pretty high maintenance and not something most people are prepared to do, right? I certainly don't want to do that. Enter intuitive eating, right? The idea that you can just eat when you're hungry until you're full and then stop. You don't starve yourself, you don't stuff yourself, and you should hopefully end up consuming roughly the number of calories you need on average. That is a nice idea, but it rests on satiety being a good indicator of caloric consumption, and that depends on the kinds of foods you're eating. Of course, more whole foods tend to be more filling and more processed foods tend to be less filling. So if you're eating a highly processed diet until you're full, you could easily go over your calorie needs. Now, we all have different appetites and calorie requirements, and most don't have such a voracious appetite that we would need to entirely avoid eating anything remotely processed in order to feel full on a normal number of calories. But what you do need to figure out, generally through trial and error, is How clean do I have to eat in order to feel full whilst consuming roughly the number of calories that enables me to maintain my weight? For most people, that means vast majority whole unprocessed foods with a little room for indulgence here and there, right? It's pretty normal. Once you have a rough idea on this, you'll be able to go for long periods of time, perhaps forever, without needing to track your calories, but still being able to maintain your leanness eating intuitively, which is really the long-term goal if you want it to be as effortless and therefore as sustainable as possible. Number 4, the holistic picture of energy levels. Anything that requires physical and mental dedication and discipline is far easier with higher energy levels. Not to mention life's just far more enjoyable, so it's a given that we should do what we can to increase and maintain them. Now, as per the first point, we shouldn't be getting and or staying so shredded, read calorie restricted, that this impacts our energy. But that's only really one factor. Beyond calories, the nutritional content of your diet also has an effect. Vitamin and mineral deficiencies are common causes of lethargy. Then there's your sleep, of course. No number of calories can counteract inadequate rest. And then there's even things like your testosterone levels, which are impacted again by diet, rest, alcohol consumption, etc. Most of these things actually just come under general health considerations, but the point is, you need to consider the whole picture of what constitutes your day-to-day energy levels, because that impacts your ability to train and recover, your ability to make good decisions, practice restraint and willpower, how you experience cravings, how you feel motivationally. Really, anything you do in life is easier with a bit more of a spring in your step, so, you know. Number 5, enjoy your training. We'll skip over this because it very almost goes without saying. Just try to find something resistance-based and something cardio-based that you enjoy. There will be something, but you might have to try a lot of things and even stick to something a little while before you realize you enjoy it. Whilst you can stay lean simply with calorie restriction, it's much more difficult. So high activity level is almost a prerequisite. Of course, if you want to maintain a lean and muscular physique, then some resistance training is essential, right? Or it'll just be lean and not muscular. But then on top of that, it's also going to be really helpful to find something more cardio focused. I personally think the best cardio you can get into is some kind of sport, because then the focus is on something other than just burning calories or getting fitter, and all of that just becomes a really good side effect. Number 6, use extra calories for good. Of course, there are times when people will eat to excess, holidays, occasions, meals out, whatever. And most people's initial course of action to try to correct for this is to do some cardio, because that's what will burn off the calories most quickly and right the wrong. I think the first thing you should do if you've wildly overeaten is lift. This is particularly important if you've recently been in or around a calorie deficit, which is when most binging happens after all. At these times, you've probably not seen a good surplus of calories for a while and felt the impact that that can have on your training. I think instead of just seeking to burn these calories off as quickly as possible, you should put them to good use and achieve some kind of hypertrophy stimulus that would otherwise have been quite difficult to achieve. You might find it's just a good day for your lifts. You might find you have the energy to do a few extra sets and get your weekly volume up. You'll definitely get a better pump. Regardless, whether you are filled with remorse or not, those calories are in you now, so you might as well use them for some good, i.e. building muscle. Read, build muscle equal good thing, it's good. Now you can always do some extra cardio after your weights if you think you need to, but I think the weights should be your priority if body composition is also the priority. There are probably more things I could mention, but I think they are the main things you need to consider and account for. Any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll respond. Unless it goes like mad viral, gets a zillion comments, then I won't. I'll just do a few.